Oh come on guys. I know. How many of you thought Gary and Wyatt were a little daft for settling for girls their own age at the end of Weird Science instead of the mature, hot, Lisa? Oh, just me then. I was playing around with some AI artificial intelligence image generators a few months back. One thing I was doing was asking them to age certain characters from our favorite 80s movies. I found that many generators would not allow you to age real people, but it would age characters. It was fascinating, for example, to ask the generator to age Lloyd Dobler, John Cusack's iconic character from 1989 Say Anything, and compare the output to how Cusack aged for real. One big problem with AI image generators is that it is really hard to get groups of people. Even when you specify them as separate people with separate descriptions, it tends to give you back multiple variations of one person. However, I did ask the generators to give me Gary, Wyatt, and Lisa hanging out at a Starbucks 20 years after the events of Weird Science. Most of the pictures were unusable, but some of them were downright hilarious, and I started to attribute storylines to the various versions. As beloved as we Generation X kids hold the movies of John Hughes, I think we need to admit that Weird Science stands out as a bit of an oddity, an outlier. As much as it is filled with positive lessons of belonging and being true to oneself, it is also predicated on two nerds using a computer to create a woman.
He's alive! Alive!
I mean, that is a big jump from a varied group of teenagers having to be stuck together on a weekend in detention. Big difference. This video is going to become a bit PG rated now, and while it's all meant to be fun, I can imagine some people will take this as misogynistic or deviant, or just plain wrong. Let's do it anyway. What if Gary and Wyatt dated their girls Hilly and Deb for a bit and just got sick of them? What if they had been spoiled by Lisa's sophistication and wild ways? What if they went back to the computer, though to modify it a bit so that Lisa was maybe a bit less big sister-like, and more girlfriend material? But from the AI-generated pictures, it may be that Gary and Wyatt over the next 20 years developed a different kind of relationship dynamic. Would they be comfortable sharing a girlfriend? Would they settle for just one? Did the two of them have different life goals? Let's assume that the new Lisas were not an exact replica. Let's also assume that after creation they did not age. So 20 years later Gary, Wyatt, and Lisa would all be about the same age. Okay, this is getting weird, so let's see what kind of weird pictures AI gave me when prompted to show me Gary, Wyatt, and Lisa from the movie Weird Science, having coffee at Starbucks 20 years after the movie.
So, what would you little maniacs like to do first?
So here we have just about the most normal picture generated. Sure, Lisa looks like she works as a waitress and Wyatt looks a bit like Chris Catton, but overall pretty nice. Three friends just hanging out. Here we see that after the guys had ditched their girlfriends, Gary went back and hooked up with Lisa. Looks to me more like 10 to 15 years later, not 20, and it's startling to see how different AI generated Gary as opposed to how Anthony Michael Hall looks. In this picture, it had been years since Gary and Lisa had seen Wyatt, and when they finally convinced him to meet for coffee, they were quite surprised at how feminine his appearance was. Gary looks a bit uncomfortable, and while Lisa is still a smoke show, you can tell they were a bit surprised by Wyatt's suggestion of a devil's three-way for old time's sake. In this next picture, Wyatt once again is looking a lot like Chris Catton. Here the guys had decided to go back to the computer and make one new Lisa model each. They made them different enough so it wasn't quite so weird when the four went out in public together. Most people just thought they had married sisters, although sometimes the two Lisas, yes they were both still called Lisa, got comments that they looked a lot like Wyanna and Naomi Judd. In this next picture, for whatever reason, Wyatt didn't want his Lisa. Maybe he found true love. That didn't stop Gary the player from living with both girls. I love how AI still made them all look like they were in the 80s even though they were aged. Don't ever let the 80s die, folks. This next picture is the same scenario, except that the three live a more outgoing lifestyle. This is them at some sort of upscale swingers club. Also of note here is that after his Weird Science days, Gary joined the Cobra Kai. Well, why just settle for two girls, thought Gary. I mean, come on, in the movie did you not get the vibe that Gary was a bit of a deviant? Did it not seem to you that maybe Wyatt had a bit of a crush on Gary and that maybe he just wasn't that into Lisa? So he helped Gary create not one, not two, but three versions of Lisa. The man is living his best life. Not sure what happened in this next picture. Maybe Wyatt created his own feminine version of Gary, but the real Gary hooked up with Lisa and the computer-generated Gary, leaving Wyatt out in the cold. So now, we have the two Garys hooked up with two Lisas. This is what I mean by AI having problems creating groups. What the holy hell is that? Has Wyatt transitioned? I mean, this was the exact same prompt as I used for the others. Does Gary really swing this way with two Stepford wife like Lisa Automans plus his former best friend? Okay, now this is more like it. Sure, it's sexist. But why would the two Lisas need Gary or Wyatt at all? Maybe they were fully sentient and dumped their asses? That's not to mean they don't like men, just not wimpy nerds like poor Gary and Wyatt. Here are two pictures of the two Lisas on the prowl. Finally, we have the four Lisas on the prowl together. Look at the feathered hair girl top right corner checking them out. These four look like they have a lot of fun together. I'm sorry, but the premise behind weird science fit right into the adolescent mindset that I still cannot shake. I mean, if we can have the Stepford wives, and sister wives, Brigham Young, The Graduate, The Last Thing He Wanted, The Client List, and sex education, why can't an 80s guy still dream about, let's call it weirder science?
Hey. Drop and give me 20.